I want attacking, purposeful football all the time. Now we're going to have backs against the wall and we're going to fight, and we're going to fight hard. You've got to show me all the guts and all the determination you've got in your body. You've got to inspire me.
A marvellous kick. That's as good as you'll ever see. And Footscray back in front.
I don't know about you guys, but if I see one bloke walking out of here, give the pat on the back from people out there for a good effort, I'll spew up.
From inside the centre square, boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe that.
Hey Pack, welcome to Danny Boyd, a podcast about the most wonderful, most brilliant, most perfect football club on earth. I'm Danny McGinlay, he's Tom Boyd, and the reason it is such a perfect club at the moment is such great stewardship, such great leadership on the field, off the field, but everywhere. Hey, Tom, can you tell I'm sucking up to the president?
Yeah, I can tell. And also, it's always easy to do these events when, we've just won on the weekend. Things are looking up. We're almost, just outside the top four, which, we discussed last week on the Patreon that there's a very real chance we could end up at either end of the spectrum, which you could say for basically 10 teams in the competition at the moment. But, a week's a long time of football, and we won by 30 points on the weekend, basically, Danny.
It was an amazing game because it was very tense for a while, and because kids go free, where I was sitting was just surrounded by toddlers who had lost interest in the game, running around. Anyway, let's. It's enough about that. Come on, we've got one of the biggest guests we've ever got. Please welcome the president of the Footscray Football Club, Proprietary Limited, trading as Western Bulldogs, Kylie Watson-Wheeler. Welcome to Danny Boyd.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute thrill, and I can't wait to have a chat with you both.
It is, we spoke about this before, and I said this is the biggest guest we've ever had. And Danny said, well, I think more people probably know Merv Hughes, but Merv's not part of the club on a day-to-day basis. And getting the actual president in to obviously have a chat about everything that's going on, how you got to the football club, how you landed in your role is such an honour for us. And, maybe we should get started with what today's all about. I mean, you're obviously not at the club every single day, and we can dig into what a president's day-to-day life looks like. But what's happened today in a really significant moment, I think, in the club's history that you're down here to announce?
Well, firstly, I don't think I've ever been compared to Merv Hughes, so that's one
well, maybe
for the book.
Again.
So that could be a one and only time. Yeah, it is a pretty exciting moment in time for our club at the moment. Today we just announced Mission Foods renewal as our major sponsor. So they're currently our sponsor for 15 years and they've renewed for another 5. So
that's awesome.
It will make them a 20-year sponsor of the club,
and
the
that's
biggest and
longest
longest we've ever had.
Wow.
And what an amazing partnership they are too. We have been through so many things together as a club, including COVID, where they continued to back us, and we couldn't be more thrilled.
Does that happen because of the type of club that the Bulldogs are, that you can foster relationships that are like a 20-year commitment from Mission Foods, as opposed to, my mind goes to with some of the bigger clubs, it's the big car companies or it's the insurance companies, but Mission Foods feel like a real sort of salt of the earth, direct to consumer.
They're a big conglomerate.
I
they're
understand,
massive,
but it doesn't feel like that.
I have a friend from Texas who chose the Bulldogs simply because she loves Mission Tacos.
Well, I'm not surprised by that. And I do think you're right, Tom, that it really does come back to our shared values. So 15 years ago, when Juan Gonzalez, the CEO and president of Mission Foods globally, came out here and he wanted to connect with AFL footy, it was something that he thought was really important to help him really grow the business and the brand here. And what he believes really separated us as a club and what made us stand out was our true values and our connection to community and how authentic we are. And there are a lot of values that we shared then in our partnership and share today. Both of our brands remain the same in the context of that and really authentic and true to who we are.
In your current position as president, you get to, I imagine, speak to all of the current presidents in, whether it's the president's luncheons or I presume you guys have some big secret meetings at some stages.
Do. I'm imagining it's just the Illuminati. You're all wearing dark hoods. It's like that, the Neighbourhood Watch Association from the film Hot Fuzz. It's very.
I feel like it's more like the G20 summit or something like that, where you're all sitting around determining the fate of the league and the world. But I imagine you get to talk to all of the different presidents about their experiences, whether they've been there for 10 years or 1 year or whatever it is in between. Do you find that the position that the Bulldogs are in terms of their connection to community really a stark difference to most of the other clubs, or is it something that the clubs kind of have in common?
Well, I think all clubs really have their point of difference, but I do think, when we say that we are the community club, the family club, it's really true. And one of the things that when I first started working with the club from an admin perspective, and obviously I'm a lifelong hardcore fan, but the thing that pleasantly surprised me was that what we say outside and how we present ourselves is 100% true and authentic to what we are inside in the club. And I think because of that, that really is our point of difference.
Yeah, I've given the example recently. So I go out and do engagements all over the state. Some in the West, some
For what role?
In terms of speaking or ambassadorships.
This is just your gigs. This isn't the what are you, the ambassador of Sons of the West? Is it?
I am the ambassador for the Community Foundation.
Community Foundation.
I'll get to that bit in a second. But in terms of my just general breadth of speaking engagements, so I've done 41 for the year so far. Most of them aren't in the West. And if I'm not in the West, essentially this is how the conversation goes. Hey, Tom, can we get a photo? My cousin is a huge Bulldogs fan, or my uncle or my friend's dog, but it's rarely in anywhere else around Melbourne an actual Bulldog supporter. A couple that we occasionally run into in other places, but in the West, in the inner West in particular, around the sort of very close vicinity to the football club, it's 50%, it's 60%. Die-hard Bulldog supporters, and if you go to the schools, it's even almost more. So I think for me to see the fact that not only the club are obviously directly affiliated with the community in terms of the close suburbs, but the way that they engage through the Community Foundation, and the fact that we are, I would say, the true suburban football club for the AFL, if that's a thing that's possible. I've always loved that about the Western Bulldogs, and I imagine that's the same for you.
And do they also say, but Bulldogs are my second team?
Yeah.
That's what I get a lot. And it's like, well, so we think we should create a second team membership. That might be a good growth for us.
That's a great idea.
I think we've got a diverse range of membership offerings in the AFL currently. There's pet memberships.
That's true. There's a lot. No, I agree with you. I do think that the love of the Dogs from a connection, an emotional connection to the region runs deep. And I think people who come from Footscray and for the Western region, even if they go elsewhere, really proud of their roots. That's me. My whole family came from Footscray. 3 generations before me, and I don't live in Footscray anymore. But barracking for a team that really represents those working class roots of my family is really important to me. But I think one of the things that is also important, while obviously we do have a dominance in the West, the fact that we've been able to really, bridge that Western corridor even deeper and going into Ballarat has been really important for the growth of our club. And when we say that, we're the team of the West, it's not just Footscray, it's that whole Western corridor, and really being able to connect with the community deeply into that space is really important for the growth.
Yeah, and I've seen that in a lot of my engagements. There are a bunch of kids running around with Bailey Smith jerseys and Aaron Norton jerseys and Cody Waitman jerseys especially in that Western corridor. Now, if you go too far west, you hit Geelong, but if you stay sort of northwest, there's a huge amount of Bulldog supporters out there now.
Yeah, where's the corridor end? Could we just keep going and eventually take some Crows fans? If we just power through?
Anything's possible. I mean, we just keep ploughing on.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. We've just got to find a way to make it really easy to get from Mount Gambier to here, there's no easy way to do that, unfortunately. And also, not that, we would ever maybe admit this publicly as a football club, but from my perspective, there's something really powerful about making interstate teams travel to Melbourne and then drive to Ballarat to play us. It's a distinct advantage. It's the same advantage that Geelong have leveraged for a long time, right? If you want to play them, you got to get on a plane, then you got to get off, you got another bus, you got to drive down there, and then you got to work out how to play in the freezing cold. It's not too dissimilar. I think it's a real advantage for us.
Clubs are getting revenge on us. I noticed Gold Coast are requesting to play us in Darwin now. Yeah. That's just to get, because we always force them to, they live in the Gold Coast. They live in Queensland. Now they're suddenly having to go and they go to Ballarat where they all get hypothermia. So they're going, all right, we're going to play you in the hottest conditions possible. But yeah, look, big question that we opened it up to the fans, and I was speaking to people at the game. I said, hey, we're interviewing the president this week. Number one question for all of us is, what's going on here at this building that we're recording in right now, the Whitten Oval? When's it back open?
Well, It's actually open from a training perspective, which is fantastic. So the fact that our playing groups are back on the turf is wonderful, and they have just been absolutely chomping the bit to get back out there. And I actually walked out there today, which is the first time I've stood on it myself, and it's pretty sweet. It looks pretty beautiful.
Feel
it just feels
spongy.
Yeah,
Good.
it feels really spongy. It feels really spongy. It's an amazing ground. But the rest of it's going to take a little bit more time. We certainly hope to be done by the end of the year. We certainly would like to get an AFLW game within the next season at the ground here, which is fantastic.
The season that will start in August, September.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's our plan.
With all the food trucks.
Well, there will certainly be ways to find food for sure. Exactly how that will be executed, you'll have to wait and see.
It was so good. And hey, if Mission Tacos want to just make it all Mexican, like that would be just an outstanding
I'd be
win.
up for that too, actually.
Although the Vietnamese one, the Ethiopian one, the Lebanese, they were all great as well. It was a great multicultural experience, and we'd love to get it back. There was many, many questions, and you might not be able to answer yet, but is the long-term plan have a men's game back here at Paradise?
Well, it's certainly our plan to have AFLW, VFL and VFLW games here. And if you saw, the phenomenal lights have gone up now.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. They are massive.
Huge.
We can play night games here.
They look amazing, and it really does help you understand how quality this venue is going to be moving forward. I think the biggest challenge about AFL games is our ability to service everybody who's in the venue, because if we fill it to capacity in that way, do we have the infrastructure really to be able to deliver on that? And so right now I would say it's not likely, but never say never. Let's see what happens.
Pre-season game would dip our toes in the water. I played my first ever pre-season game here, actually. It was like 40 degrees, blowing a gale, and the only touch I got, I think, was a downfield free kick for a goal. So, but you speak
Perfect
about
conditions.
Yeah, well, I played against my housemate too. He let me know that I didn't get a kick. You mentioned quality, and I think that, super high level quality is maybe not something that this, in terms of like infrastructure and buildings, is probably not something that this club has been used to or really ever had access to, at least not in my time. How did you, and I'm sure you are only one part of this conversation, but how do you work through, this high level, high tech quality building and infrastructure while still trying to keep the identity of as we said earlier, a really community based football club with some iconic things around the place that, really stand out as part of Bulldogs history? How do you find the balance between those two things? Well,
I think the important thing is to recognise is that we deserve to have the best of the best. So just because we're here in the West, or we're from the West, or we haven't, been the wealthiest club, we
deserved it 10 years ago, Kylie.
Exactly. So we're catching up. But I think from that perspective, to recognise that this, until the next team has their next redevelopment, for a period of time, this will be the best venue in the AFL for a period of time from the context of that. And I think that really recognising that that's not only a gift to our playing groups and our executive and our football department, but it is also a gift to our community. And a lot of the things that we've done in relation to the redevelopment is to create space for the community, a lot of areas for any of the community programs that we're running, and ensuring that we're doing those in a way that, it's not like in some kind of back room, tucked in somewhere. It's in a really beautiful part of the venue. And I think being able to really celebrate having a venue like this in the West is something really special, not just for our club.
I certainly don't mean to sound like I'm pandering to you, Kylie, but I said this at a function on Saturday for a local club who was about to demolish and rebuild their facilities. And I watched it happen firsthand at my local club. The impact that it has in terms of community engagement when you turn it from what it currently is, which is a mix and match between, the new infrastructure and the old, and clearly we're in a stage of transition. But even, their, cafe and ground and stands of all old to what it will be when it's finished in 6 to 12 months' time, it's so significant. And I think people forget that, we're not building this for the 22 guys or girls that run out every week. We're not building it for, the players who are in the VFL. We're just building it for the entire community, and the ability for the community to access it obviously then becomes a very important part of it, and to be able to sort of bring them back to the fold after as I said, has been quite a transitory period of time over the last 12 months. How does the club, enable the communities to really spend a lot of time here and not only use it as a place to celebrate what's going on, but also as clearly a recruitment tool would be ideal to bring up membership and engagement?
Well, we wouldn't have got the extensive, government support that we did for this space, both at the state and federal level, if legitimately and authentically we were not providing space and opportunity for the community. And I agree with you. I think as far as from a football perspective, and you know this better than the two of us in relation to, if you're a player and you're looking for a new home and, recognising that you've got, the best of facilities, the highest of quality of machinery and materials and whatever it is that you need to maximise your fitness and your ability to play at your best on the field, but also ensuring that, as I said, that there are spaces that the community can come, whether it is a cafe, whether it is an opportunity to utilise meeting rooms or meeting spaces or be part of our programs. And so that's really what has driven our opportunity to actually to be able to create this amazing space, because that really is what led to us getting the commitment from the governments.
Meeting rooms. We could just have a meeting at Whitten Oval. You could just book that room. That's awesome. What about weddings? Yep. Could I get married here? I'm already married.
Could I? Okay, let's just don't make home life harder than you need to be.
If you would like to renew your vows,
I would love to.
You will be able to do that here
at Whitten Oval,
and you'll be able to overlook the city while you do it.
Oh I still don't think my wife will be keen, but let's do it.
Anna suggested we do it again the other day in a few years' time, so maybe I'll swing it. And also, thank you for thinking that I did enough due diligence to know what the facilities were like here before I signed. I actually didn't know I was on the other side of the West Gate. That's how well I was going when I signed with the footy club. I remember I signed, and one of my mates go, "Oh, that's ages away, isn't it over the West Gate?" I'm like, "Nah, it's just on this side of town somewhere." But I'd had a very good offer to come and play here, so yeah.
Well, that worked out okay for us, so we're pretty happy you didn't know where it was.
Well, they still let me back in the building, Kylie, which is the most important thing, because that's not the case for every ex-player, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing in terms of, when did Bulldogs fandom start? What was the absolute peaks and troughs of that experience during your, young days? And then, maybe we'll get into a little bit more what it actually looks like to be a president on a day-to-day basis.
Well, in my young days, it was more troughs than peaks. And one of the things that, I never ever have left a game before the game finished, because my dad used to say to me when I was a kid, well, if you leave before the game finishes, if you're losing, you'll never see a game to the end, being a dog supporter back in the day, because we didn't win that many games when I was a kid. But, it really comes back to my roots, as I said earlier, a couple of generations of Footscray people, my dad and, my grandfather, enormously connected to the club and huge fans and very, very passionate. And so I always went to the footy with my dad, and my sister and I would stand on, the wing at what was then the Whitten Oval on a wooden box that my grandfather made so I could see.
Which wing? Doug Hawkins wing or
Opposite.
Grandstand wing?
Grandstand wing.
Nice.
And, through all of the weather, as you said, it would gale through there and, but it was such an amazing community too, as far as, the people that you grew up standing there around. And so for me, I've just always gone to the footy with Dad. It's a big part of, my background, my history, what my family represents and stands for. And, it's kind of bled into a bit, how I see myself as being, a battler and not necessarily getting everything handed to me on a silver platter. I had to fight for what I wanted and fight to progress in the roles that I have in my work life. But I was there at the Save the Bulldog rally, sitting behind the goals. I was in year 12, aging myself by mentioning that. But
yeah.
I had said to my dad, it was my year 12 study week, and I said to Dad, "Can I go?" And he said, "Well, as long as you take your homework." So I sat behind the goals with my homework on my knee. I don't think I did any. But what was fascinating is that Peter Gordon was standing in the middle of that ground. I was 17.
Doing that great speech.
And he was up there. And then to imagine that 30 years later I would replace him in that role is pretty extraordinary, and I would never have imagined.
Absolutely crazy that happened. What was do you remember the first time when it ever occurred to you that you might be president of the club?
When Peter said to me 4 years before I became president, "Will you take over from me?"
Okay, yeah, that's a bit of a clue. Hang on,
yeah, that's a good moment.
I don't have to be Poirot here. I reckon that's a definite sign.
I feel like one of the great sort of eternal consistencies between all football clubs is that sometimes it's very hard to find a replacement in the president section. I mean, you talk to any local presidents, they're like, I signed up for 2. I've been here for 15.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit like
Yes.
that. What is it? So how is it physically and mentally possible for you to juggle everything that you have going on, not only in your work life, but obviously...
Well, people might not even know. You. What is your role at Disney?
I'm the managing director of the Walt Disney Company.
Wow. For like the whole Southern Hemisphere or...
For Australia and New Zealand, and then I also run ESPN, which is owned by the Walt Disney Company for Asia Pacific.
Wow.
Sounds like a pretty simple job.
It's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, it does sound awesome.
Yeah.
It's I just wanted to clarify. You said your dad and grandfather were involved in the club. What were their roles?
Oh no, just passionate.
Oh,
Just-
okay,
yeah,
right.
Just absolutely passionate. Diehard fans.
And before we get into that, what was your favourite game at Whitten Oval from your like? You go back to your memories pre-97. What's the game that stands out?
Well, I'm going to get the number of goals wrong, but I did. The first number I wore on my jumper was Kelvin Templeton.
Nice.
And I do remember a game where he kicked an absolute bag. 15 goals.
Yeah, I think it was against St Kilda.
And thank you, Danny. And I do remember that being particularly at a time where, we were not a successful club really on the field. And, to witness that with, the player that was your hero was really extraordinary. So that's a real standout for me.
I see that with my son loves Cody Waitman, and anytime Cody gets a goal, there's an even bigger cheer from him. It's pretty that childhood. Who did you love growing up, Boydie? Or he was already probably when Boydie was like 5, he was already training, so he probably didn't have a hero. Probably looked at Steve Kernan and went, "Yeah, I could do that."
Well, again, you got to remember, I'm only 27, mate. So Steve Kernan was slightly before my time. Like, my earliest memories of like Brett Ratton and his era is basically the youngest players I can remember. Actually watching them, like Lance Whitnell a little bit later. And then like my peak fandom is probably Juddy, because that's when he came across from West Coast, and it was like, we'd been rubbish forever, and now we had this superstar coming across to be Vizzy ambassador or whatever he was doing at the time.
Those were the days.
Those are the days, yeah. That was a real gravy train, that one. But yeah, and then to Danny's point, I think the unfortunate part about trying to get into the professional ranks and sort of going through state and talent pathways at the age of 14 or 15 is you're very much heavily encouraged to watch players, not because of the jumper on their back, but the way that they play. And I would say I spent most of my time sort of in the last 2 or 3 years of my draft cycle, I suppose, watching first Tom Hawkins and then Josh Kennedy and then later Joey Danaher as he came into the league. So I don't have the same like attachment. And also Carlton haven't been good in a long time. So it's kind of hard to remember a time when I was loving being a Carlton supporter.
Oh, see, I know this is a Bulldogs podcast, but I just love hearing Carlton fans being upset.
I know.
It's one of the great joys of my Sunday nights at the moment. Almost every week that I get to text my mum, dad, and my sisters and say, "How did they go?"
So do you get approached to be on the board? Did you put your hand? It's quite complicated processes to get on the board.
And if I can add, the other thing is I don't think the fans have a great understanding of how this part of the club actually works. No,
we don't.
And
most people think the president runs the club every day. Yeah. You're here, like Mr. Burns at the nuclear power plant in your big office, telling your minions what to do, and looking at cameras, going, "Who's that player? Number 4, Bontempelli, eh?"
Yeah. So how does that process work? Because I think one of the things that I mentioned to you when we ran into each other is I know you well enough. We've met a bunch of times over the last almost decade now. And I, love talking to you, and I see exactly why you are in the position that you are. But for the rest of the fan base, it's hard to relate to almost any president of any club, unless it's basically Eddie Maguire, who was on TV and radio all day, every day, or Jeff Kennedy was on the TV and radio almost every day, or obviously your predecessor in Peter, who did a lot of engagement around the club over a 30-year stretch or whatever it was. So how do you, as Danny said, how do you get actually elected into the board space? Do you just put your hand up and say, "I'd be good at this," or how does that work?
No, that's not how it happened for me. So basically going back, I think around 15 years ago, David Smorgan, knew one of the people that I work with from in my commercial life, and happened to be lamenting that they needed some help in a particular area of business. And this guy suggested he should talk to me, he said, Kylie's a hardcore doggy and I reckon she could help you. And so when your club rings and says, can you help us? You say, sure, what do you need me to do? And so I just started working on some of their business plans, just, redlining them, providing them with some advice and insight.
What does that
Sitting
mean?
there with a red pen and going, no, you can't do that.
Oh.
And then, writing in the margins, all of that stuff that I'm sure when they got them, the internal eye roll would continue when Kylie would send her red lines in.
Depends how much red was there.
Yeah, exactly. And back in those days, there was a little bit of red, way less than there's way less now, that's for sure. But I think from that opportunity, I just was involved in the club, just did whatever they needed from me. I was more than happy to help. And then when Peter took over then as president, he was changing the composition of the board and he was looking for someone with my particular skill set and asked me if I would throw my hat in the ring. So
What would you say that skill set is, Kylie?
Because whenever I hear the words particular skill set, I imagine Liam Neeson in Taken.
There's a bit of translation that goes on in this podcast because Danny represents, I'd say, people who obviously don't work in the corporate sector. And again, I'm still asking the question, what skill set would you say is the sort of overwhelming strength of yours that you bring to the club?
Well, certainly commercial acumen and at that time, probably marketing, really trying to work out how do we bring in more fans, more a broader audience, how do we connect more deeply with our sponsors and our partnerships, and how do we really take what I was saying before about what our club really represents and help people to really understand that. So I would say that's really what he was looking for at that time, and I went through a process and I was interviewed against other people, but then they did select me to join the board.
You have to interview to be on the board?
I did at the time, yeah, I did.
Wow.
Yeah, I went through a couple of rounds of interviews.
Are they grilling you like, who wore number 7 in 1993?
Different set of questions. About
Well, then you would definitely make it onto the board, Danny, if that is the criteria.
This
that
is
for
where
sure.
we're leading.
Yes. You certainly know all of the facts, but no, nothing like that. Really, just looking for, and I think looking for a couple of things. One, really making sure that whoever they're talking to actually has the skill set required, and then also whether or not you'd be a good fit. Because what's really important about a board is that you all do have to have a level of connectivity. And I think one of the things that makes our board great is that it really is made up of a huge variety of skill sets. It's not all lawyers, it's not all accountants. It's a real mix of people from different backgrounds with different expertise. And, Peter really started that. And that's when I joined the board. And so then after our grand final win, he asked me if I'd be the vice president to help him out and partner with him more closely. And then he asked me for 4 years in a row, will you be president? And I said, no. And then eventually, yes.
Now, this is not reflective, I don't think, so much in the people that were at the club prior to 2014. But when I joined, this club wasn't the sort of juggernaut that it is now in terms of access or, even the positioning of where we play during the fixture. Because in 2015, my first season... 2015, my first season here, I spent the entire year watching my housemate Nick Flossman from Richmond leave for the beach on a Saturday morning and me prepare for a game on a Sunday afternoon. How has that 10-year journey been, do you think, from the club, not only where you sort of stepped in officially in the board role, but then also obviously now since taking over as president? How has that journey been? Because from the outside looking in, as someone who's obviously been a part of a portion of it, the club has gone from, really a relatively weak position to a really, really strong one today.
Well, I think there are multiple factors to that. One is definitely getting ourselves into a position where we're financially viable and absolutely stable for the future. So none of us have to be sitting here worrying, will our club exist in the future? And we've been through that before, Danny, several times in our lives. So to know that that is not the case is a real game changer for us. And success breeds success. So when you're in a position where you've got some momentum from a commercial perspective, you're able to bring in other partners, you're able to really enhance that. And then, of course, really as far as the things that you were talking about, as far as when our game is fixtured, that really comes down with the quality of on-field performance. And from that perspective, the fact that for many years now, our team plays a very exciting brand of football, that we've got some really exciting footballers within that team, and we have, even those that have left and finished up, like you, Tom, when you think about that connectivity that the audiences have. And the thing is that we're not going to get the prime time spots on the broadcast if just because of Bulldogs fans watching. You need to be bringing in a much broader audience. So I think from that perspective, there's an excitement around our club. There's an excitement around our team that really has that knock-on effect. And certainly winning the grand final in 16, gave us a big leg up in the context of that.
And look, at the end of the day, and I've been very clear, football clubs at some times forget that football clubs are about football and that the 22 on the field and the different sides are the only thing that really matters in terms of that's the product that you're putting out there. But what I would say is that I've also been at football clubs where, the executive branch, if you will, so the board and the, higher ups and the people who make decisions, the suits aren't functioning properly. And the flow-on effect down to the players is really palatable because it's like, football is hard enough at the top level and trying to compete. And, again, we won't have to dig into the individual clubs around the league, but there's clearly some dysfunction going on at other clubs at different times. There's been dysfunction that went on here, I'm sure, in our history. And the players carry the weight of that, right? Because you've got to answer questions about it. There's always this negative connotation towards a club because there's one issue or another popping up, or there's a public spat, or someone left, or someone, there's always something going on. And I think that the best thing that the administration that's been here in the last, and certainly that you've been a part of for the last 10 years, is just it's relatively smooth sailing the whole time. And the handover from Peter to you was really smooth. Your commitment to obviously helping getting this big project off the ground, that really does play down into the players that are here because they're mental conversation, whilst maybe not in my experience when I got traded here, given the circumstances that I was traded under. But for a lot of players, if you look at a club and you go, they're offering me X amount of money, but they're always in the news for something bad going on. It's a real decision that you have to make because, we all sort of get tarred with the same brush in one way, shape or form. So I think for the last 10 years of smooth sailing and the success that you mentioned before, it certainly helps the players and makes their job easier.
Well, I do think that comes down to two things. One I mentioned before, having that real breadth of experience on the board, and you've got people who are there for the absolute right reason. So they're not there for anything other than wanting to deliver the best they possibly can to support and help the club. And then I think a really strong partnership with the executive as well, so between the board and the executive. And what you were saying then about, the players having to bear the weight of what's happening at board level, really what should happen is the players should not even be thinking about the board. We should not even be entering their mind, because if that's the case, it means we're doing our job and we're doing what needs to happen, and we're creating an opportunity for them to have the maximum resource that they possibly need for the best on-field performance. And that's really ultimately what we aim for.
How often does the board meet?
Once a month officially, but we obviously spend a lot of time together at games.
You got a WhatsApp group?
We don't actually. We should set one up.
There we go.
Okay.
See, I'm an ideas man.
I love that. That's your commitment to the group. It's if you guys thought about WhatsApp, that's the only bit of advice that you have to offer.
And so, what happens at a board meeting? Is it here at Whitten Oval in the big fancy room?
Yep. Yeah, it's here in the boardroom.
Is there catering?
No, because it starts at 3 p.m.
Oh, okay. All right.
Although sometimes there's chocolate and fruit.
For full transparency, that was Danny's biggest question coming into this. You guys, do they eat steak, or is it
I just wonder if you get a mission taco.
We do get a coffee. We get a coffee.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is pretty good. But how long does it go for? Are they heated, or is it someone just reading out? Are you getting Jeff Morgan? I know he's the accountant at the board. Is he just reading out the facts and figures, or what happens?
Yeah, it depends on. Every month there's different agenda items. Obviously, there are things that are hot topics that we need to be addressing and dealing with from a governance perspective. So we're working through those. We do have football come and present to us 3 times a year. So both AFL and AFLW. So coaches come in and tell us what's going on with the playing group, and they're pretty honest and upfront. We don't get. It's not sugar coated. They're pretty clear and share what's really going on behind the scenes.
They
which
come
is great
in, they
for us
say,
to know.
Boydie's back is effed. We can't do, he's cooked. He's no good. And he's like that, or?
Well, we definitely do get an injury update. Yes, okay. Yes, that's for sure. But, it's a commercial business. And I think, when you think about the context of professional sport, of course, the most important thing is the output on the field. But, a club, the AFL, it's a big commercial enterprise. So, we're running it as a big commercial business, and as a result, we've got lots of things that we need to consider and process. And you're right, looking at the P&L and determining, if we're going to make budget this year.
Wait, what's P&L?
profit and loss.
Thank you.
Profit and loss sheet.
P one's the good one.
I'm such the kid at the grown-ups table.
Maximise the P and minimise the L.
All right, sweet. Yeah, no else. And how long do they go for?
Around about 3 hours. I'm quite the taskmaster, so I
Yeah.
do like to keep things on
Now,
time.
starts at 3, goes to 6. You might want to think about the catering. WhatsApp group, Mission Taco, halfway through.
But if you have a break, then it goes longer. So
Oh no, you
you've
can
gotta
eat
just
while
keep
you
on.
do your P&Ls.
How did it? How was the? I don't think void is the right word to use, but what is it like taking over from a guy like Peter? I mean, as you know, so many Bulldogs fans would know his face. They would know his history. The fight back is so well documented, particularly in fans who've been fans of this club for a long time. And he also was at the forefront of every major moment. I would say a lot of them negative, not to mention in the last decade and a half, 2 decades. How long's it been? How is it walking into as your first board meeting in that scenario when Peter's obviously just left?
Well, it was really seamless because Peter and I had worked so closely together for so long, particularly over the 4 years that I was his vice president, and we had really planned for it. Although it was during COVID, so our handover did happen during COVID. So, yeah, remotely, you're right. But there was definitely that feeling of trust and preparedness, trust from him and preparedness in me that I think really enabled us to just be able to pass the baton and keep things moving. But I have a great relationship with Peter. Of course, he's my mentor. So, during those early times, I talked to him all the time. So, it wasn't as if then he just disappeared into the ether and never spoke to me again. So I think from that perspective, having that continuity of dialogue was also really important. But I think the interesting thing when you talk about Peter's profile, both Peter and David, if you combine their tenures, it was 30 years. Now, I'm currently 2.5 years into my tenure, and my first year as president of Bulldogs, it was it was still COVID, so we were still in lockdown. And so, one of the things that I do to try to get closer to our fan base is I do a video, 3 or 4 times a year to our members where I update them on what's happening at the club, hopefully in a way for them to get to know me a little bit more. But, make no mistake, if we found ourselves in a situation, which both Peter and David did several times on the journey, where in any way our club was threatened, and I touch wood and I hope that we're not, but make no mistake, I will be as loud and as vocal and as, and as present and as public as I need to be to make sure we do whatever we need to do to save our club. So, or to rectify whatever situation there is. So from that perspective, I'm very, very active at the club. I speak at every single event that we have. I'm engaging constantly with everyone across the club. I work very, very closely with Amit, and I think one of the things that makes a great club is a strong relationship between the president and the CEO. And Amit and I communicate pretty much every day, 7 days a week during the seasons, and to be honest, not that far off that in the off season. So that connection and that communication is really important as we kind of drive the club together.
I've just got goosebumps thinking about Kylie getting her bristles up,
Oh, yeah. I want to see.
Someone comes after us and just, I don't think so.
So are we talking, so you're talking like, if we had to be on the front foot, the media was attacking us for some reason, or there was a crisis, like what sort of level are we talking? Are we talking, like probably the biggest crisis week is when, the CEO leaves and the coach leaves and the captain walks
2014.
out. 2014. Oh, are we talking more when, Toby Green ninja kicks Luke Dalehouse in the face? Would you come out then?
Well, I don't think necessarily it's the president's role to weigh in on that publicly.
All right, leave that to the idiot fans. I'll take that role.
But if there was anything in relation to that, rule wise or that needed to be taken up with the AFL, well, certainly I would be on the phone to them addressing that. And there are a lot of things that there's battles to be fought behind the scenes, and there's battles to be fought in the public. And I think really being clear on what they need to be and which they should be. And as you said, if you're currently losing all of your key leaders in the club, then that's a pretty public issue that you have to deal with publicly. But if there's some issue that a rule or a player has done something that has slighted our club, well, I think that's a behind the scenes AFL discussion.
I think this gets back to what you said before, Kylie, where you mentioned that the players shouldn't know almost that the board are almost that they don't exist. Now, I would argue that a lot of boards don't take that too literally, and they think that, oh, well, the players should know that we exist, so any problems that we cause doesn't affect the players, which, as I said before, is certainly not the case. But equally, I would say the fact that you haven't had to get your bristles up in public is reflective of a couple of things. One, that the club is going quite smoothly, and without disparaging other clubs, was just focusing on the Bulldogs, the fact that you have a really strong connection with Amit, and the fact that you have a very smooth handover from Peter, and the fact that we're in a position where the club's in a really profitable situation, that is not the case at almost any of the clubs. Now, I know there are other clubs that are bigger than us, probably traditionally, but we're in a really different position than the club that I joined almost 10 years ago at the end of this year. So I think that is a really good point to make, that the reason the fans probably aren't seeing you as much as they perhaps saw Peter in the past is because things are going a bit better than perhaps at different stages, and that we should almost wish to not see you all the time, because that means there's probably a bit of crisis stuff going on.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Nah, come out and talk about how good we are. Come out. No, but you are doing something. People don't realise how much you're out. You sat with the cheer squad in a Ballarat game.
Well, that's about my favourite thing to do. I wish I could do it more often, actually. I was in the cheer squad when I was a teenager.
Oh,
so I do recognise and understand, how much, Chelsea and the team, really lean in and what they contribute, in a volunteer basis to the club, and and how they connect with our playing groups. I mean, can you imagine if there was no pom-poms and flags and everything?
The floggers. I love the big ones are called floggers. I didn't know that till I was taught that. You can handle a flogger.
That's true. But imagine if they weren't there, and they do that out of an absolute love and commitment to the club, and they should be valued just as much as the board, from my perspective.
Oh, agreed. Actually, one nice thing I've been to, I've mates who are security guards. Just they work at the comedy clubs and TV stations. The head of security at Docklands at Marvel Stadium does say that, because you have to station a guard in front of the cheer squad. He said, never issues with the Bulldogs. They're his favourite cheer squad to stand in front of.
I'm not at all surprised by that.
So,
we've taken up a lot of your time, Kylie, but I do want to ask maybe one more sort of big question. What is we've got the big development, and clearly that's taking up a lot of bandwidth, I'd say, of the people in your position and around you. What's the next big thing that the club wants to accomplish? It doesn't necessarily have to be bricks and mortar, obviously, but what's the big sort of 5-year, 10-year plan that maybe the fans haven't had a brief look at or any understanding of at this time?
Well, certainly seeing the redevelopment through is really important, and then there'll be a lot that will come off the back of that. We were talking about having games here and events here, and creating a commercial enterprise out of the venues. So I was serious about you will be able to have weddings here. You will be able to have conferences here and all those types of things. So I think off the back of the redevelopment being completed, then in some ways the work really begins, because then it's about how do you really maximise it and commercialise it, and make sure that it's a space that continues to return for us as a club, because then it becomes an asset for us. So then it really helps us to continue to be viable, and then that cycle, really continues. I think also, though, one of the things that I think we're really standing on the cusp of is, you talked earlier about, the appeal our playing group has in the context of, when we're being fixtured and the like. And, I do think that as a club, we're in a really, really great place in the context of that, and what our playing groups really stand for, and they represent both our men's and our women's. And how can we really leverage that to continue to really grow our fan base, to continue to really connect with fans, so that we're not everybody's second team, we're everybody's first. So I think that's a focus for us as a board moving forward, and as an executive.
It is. Wouldn't it be great? Just all of Australia just goes for the Bulldogs. That's a good. Let's aim for the stars.
Well, that'd be good for us. I'm not sure that'd be good for footy, but I think it'd be good for us.
One thing, I don't know if we do this very actively, but I notice a lot of new Australians choose the Bulldogs. Has that been have we gone out of our way? Are we there at immigration, at customs, handing out scarves and stuff? Because nothing fills me more with joy than to see a lot of multicultural faces at the footy, and you see whole families. It's really brilliant. Has that happened organically because the West is so multicultural, or is that something we've chased?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, definitely we do focus on it because, you know, our region really does have a lot of new entrants into it and new families coming in and wanting to find ways to connect with the local culture. And so as a club, we've really helped them to do that, which I think has been really important. But I think why that has also happened for us is that authentically we really do support multiculturalism in our region, and we support these communities and we bring them into our home and we make our home theirs. And I think from that perspective, there's a real authenticity in their connection. It's not just about picking a team, it's about, you know, picking a home.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
good.
Should we do listener mail before we wrap up?
Yes,
So
quickly do
There's
this.
only a couple of questions because you've actually answered most of the people's answers. I love this question. Tim, who's actually one of our Patreons, he has a podcast called The Whiskey Bulldog where he talks about the Bulldogs and whiskey.
We met Tim the other day, is that right?
No, we didn't meet.
We met the other Bulldogs
but we should
podcast.
meet Tim.
There's a plethora of Bulldogs podcasts out there, would you believe, Kylie?
We love all of them. I love this question, and if you need time to think about it, I'll put in some special effects in post production because I genuinely would love to know. What's a fun fact about Footscray Football Club that you learnt on the job that many people on the outside wouldn't know?
You know, it's funny because I actually did speak about it before. You know, I certainly knew what being a Bulldog supporter meant to me, and I knew what the Bulldogs meant, you know, from a brand and from a connection to me emotionally. I guess what was a surprise sounds like the wrong thing to say, but I guess a pleasant surprise was that what you see is absolutely what you get. So the context of everything that we say we are as a club, everything that we represent externally is absolutely how we operate here. And there's a level of authenticity to that I could never have really imagined. And, you know, I do come from the corporate world, and you know that's not necessarily the case in many companies, but to really find
Are you saying Telstra's my call isn't important to them when I'm on hold for 4 hours?
I'm so sure it is. But you know, when you get here and you realise that everybody really, really believes that and really understands and believes in our values, and the decisions that we make as a club are always tied to that. You know, a perfect example is, you know, us getting out of pokies, and, you know, several clubs have not and have made the decision not to, but we know that that was the right thing to do for our people in our community, and that was what was truly representative of what we stand for as a club. And so I think that authenticity, while not necessarily a massive surprise, but a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I love that. All right,
Simon, Peter and Smallgo did 30 years. That's the other interesting stat that I didn't think about before we jumped on
30 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
I'm 27, Danny. That's older than me.
Of course. Yeah. See, for us oldies, that's like, you know, that's last week. All right, finishing with a fun question. Simon on Facebook just was talking about the Disney connection and whatever, and I want to bring my own spin onto this. First of all, you know, which Bulldogs player should be in a Disney film? Because I reckon Gabby Newton does look like she could easily, you know, be in a ball gown and
Disney princess.
A Disney princess. Mm-hmm. And I asked my 6-year-old daughter which Disney princess would play the best for the Bulldogs. She rolled her eyes at how dumb the question was. She just went, "Dad, Mulan, obviously. She's a warrior. She would play the best."
I love that.
So yeah, which players would you put? Who would you cast in a Disney film? Because the managing director's in charge of casting.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, you know, he's our number one fan. Chris Hemsworth, of course, is an Avenger, so he could probably help in make the selection. And
he'd probably help on the field, actually, if we really wanted to roll.
Oh yeah, he's looking good.
Put him in the centre.
Well, I'm not sure you might want him to run, but perhaps if there's somebody who could just stand there and then just reach up.
Go play on Tom Hawkins. That'd be great. He doesn't run that far.
That could work. I'll feed that back to Bevo. I'll see what he thinks about that. But you know, red, white, and blue. So you know, we are, you know, Captain America is red, white, and blue.
Yeah, nice.
So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go for the Bond. I mean, could he be Captain America? I mean, he's got the
Captain Australia.
Wow. Yeah, Bond's kind of the best at everything. So
that's
roll
right.
It out there. He'd love the silver screen.
It's true. Could we use? This is my question on this. Could we use more? Because we've got a lot of the intellectual property of Disney and Marvel and all that. Could we? Because Disney have everything. Star Wars, The Simpsons. Could we get some, Simpsons gags happening around Marvel at different times? And Star Wars, like GWS are stormtroopers. Let's face it. They're the Empire.
Danny's only second greatest love is talking about this stuff. So it's the doggies and then it's...
How much pop culture references could we get from Disney, like, to make the Bulldogs even... to bring the nerds in? You want to get more fans, bring the nerds in.
Well, our social media team here is actually already pretty good at that.
They're very good.
Yeah, they do bring in a bit of Mandalorian, a lot of Simpsons. They're pretty good at taking our IP and using it without paying for it, which I have to turn a blind eye to.
Yeah, could we get more of that? Ultimately, is my question. In the match day, that's just what we're after.
Well, our most criticised jumper of all time.
Yes, we know.
The Thor jumper, but also the highest revenue generating jumper.
Dead set.
See,
by far.
It pays for everyone to hate you.
Yeah,
all right.
by far.
And while we're on Hemsworth, could you put in a word? We kind of want him on the pod. So,
that would be a get.
That would
I don't know if we can afford him, honestly.
We're happy to fly up to Byron to go into his...
he can fly us up there to interview him.
Let me see what I can do. He's got a private jet. He'd come pick you up.
Oh, hello. This is pretty good.
Kylie, I know this started a very brief conversation, obviously, at the president's function, but thank you so much for your time today. As I've said to you privately, I love discussing things with you. I love chatting with you. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I certainly hope that for fans like you, Danny, and the others obviously who listen, that they've given a bit more of a window into the life of a club president at the Western Bulldogs in 2023.
Yeah, it's great to get to know you, and I'm happy you're in charge, steering the ship, and please come back and chat to us. How about every year? We'll get you on.
Deal.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I gave my childhood to that roar of the red, white and blue sea, and the knowledge that you had two loves, the Bulldog boys and me. 20 years on, I feel that longing hanging in September air. But the reason I go every week is to pretend you're still there. And they will find the glory one day, and I will throw it at your feet. It's a long, long road they're running for you, the dogs of Footscray streets. It's a long, long road they're running for you, the dogs of Footscray streets.